A company you have heard of is finally going public. The headlines say IPO. You get excited. You open your brokerage app, ready to buy in on day one. Here is what nobody tells you. The word IPO gets used as if it only means one thing: a company selling stock for the first time. It does not only mean that. There are at least 9 different ways a company can actually go public, and the method they choose tells you exactly who had the advantage before you even had the chance to click buy. Here is every kind of IPO, how it actually works, and who it favors. Traditional IPO. This is the IPO everyone pictures when they hear the word. A traditional IPO is the standard process most people think of. The company hires investment banks, called underwriters, who help determine the share price, market the offering to large institutional investors, and manage the entire process of selling new shares to the public. Before the stock ever trades on a public exchange, the underwriters conduct what is called a roadshow, presenting the company to large institutional investors, hedge funds, mutual funds, pension funds, who get first access to shares at the initial offering price. By the time regular retail investors can buy shares on the open market, the price has often already moved, sometimes significantly from that initial offering price. The institutions that got in early frequently see an immediate gain the moment public trading begins. Retail investors buying on day one are often buying at a price that already reflects that early institutional demand. Direct listing. This is the IPO that skips the entire underwriter process. A direct listing allows a company to go public without issuing new shares through underwriters at all. Instead, existing shares, held by employees, early investors, and founders, are simply listed directly on a public exchange. No roadshow, no underwriters setting an initial price, no new capital raised for the company in the process. The opening price is determined by actual supply and demand on the exchange itself, when trading begins, rather than being set in advance by a small group of institutional buyers. Direct listings have become more common among well-known, well-funded companies that do not urgently need to raise new capital, but want to provide liquidity for existing shareholders, allowing employees and early investors to sell their shares without the traditional underwriting markup and process. Dutch Auction IPO. This is the IPO that lets the market set the price, instead of a handful of bankers. A Dutch auction IPO determines the share price through a public bidding process, rather than underwriters setting a fixed price in advance. Potential investors submit bids, indicating how many shares they want and at what price they are willing to pay. The company and its advisors then determine the highest price at which all available shares can be sold, based on that collected bidding data. This method is intended to create a more transparent and equitable process, theoretically reducing the advantage that large institutional investors have in a traditional IPO, where they often receive shares at a price lower than where the stock ultimately opens for public trading. Dutch auction IPOs remain relatively uncommon compared to traditional IPOs, though several high-profile companies have used this structure specifically to attempt a more democratic pricing process. SPAC. This is the IPO that happens before the actual company even exists yet in its final form. A SPAC, a special purpose acquisition company, is a shell company with no actual business operations that goes public first, raising money from investors with the stated purpose of eventually merging with a private company, taking that private company public through the merger, rather than through a traditional IPO process. Investors in the initial SPAC IPO are essentially trusting the SPAC's management team to find a good company to merge with, often without knowing in advance exactly which company that will be. Once a merger target is identified and the deal closes, the combined company begins trading under the target company's new identity. SPACs became extremely popular during certain periods, offering companies a potentially faster and less regulatory-intensive path to going public compared to a traditional IPO, though they also faced significant criticism regarding the quality of some merger targets and the fees involved in the structure. Secondary offering. This is not technically an IPO, but understanding it clarifies exactly what makes an IPO actually initial. A secondary offering occurs when an already publicly traded company issues additional new shares to raise more capital, after its original IPO has already taken place. Unlike the company's original IPO, which introduces the stock to public markets for the first time, a secondary offering simply adds more shares to an already existing public market. This can dilute the ownership percentage of existing shareholders, since the same company is now divided into more total shares than before. Companies typically pursue secondary offerings to raise additional capital for expansion, debt reduction, or other strategic purposes, without taking on additional debt through borrowing instead. Follow-on public offering. This is the offering that specifically clarifies who is actually selling the shares. A follow-on public offering, an FPO, is closely related to a secondary offering, but the term specifically distinguishes between two different scenarios. A dilutive FPO involves the company itself issuing brand new shares, similar to a secondary offering, increasing the total number of shares outstanding. A non-dilutive FPO involves existing large shareholders, such as company founders or early investors, selling their already existing shares to the public, without the company issuing any new shares at all. In a non-dilutive FPO, existing shareholders are cashing out some portion of their holdings, while the total number of company shares remains completely unchanged. Understanding this distinction matters because a dilutive offering affects every existing shareholder's ownership percentage, while a non-dilutive offering simply transfers existing ownership from one party to another. Dual-class IPO. This is the IPO where not all shares are actually created equal. A dual-class IPO involves a company going public with two or more distinct classes of stock, each carrying different voting rights. Public investors typically receive shares with one vote per share, or sometimes significantly fewer voting rights, or none at all, while company founders and early insiders retain a separate class of shares carrying substantially more voting power per share, sometimes 10 times or more. This structure allows founders to raise public capital while retaining significant control over company decisions, even while owning a relatively small percentage of the company's overall economic value. Supporters argue this protects long-term company vision from short-term market pressure. Critics argue it significantly reduces accountability to public shareholders, who are providing real capital while receiving comparatively little actual influence over how that capital gets used. Reverse merger. This is the IPO that technically is not an IPO at all. A reverse merger, sometimes called a reverse IPO, occurs when a private company becomes publicly traded by merging into an already publicly listed company, often a smaller, sometimes largely inactive shell company, rather than going through a traditional IPO process. The private company's shareholders typically end up owning a controlling majority stake in the combined, now public entity. This method can be significantly faster and less expensive than a traditional IPO, avoiding much of the regulatory review and underwriting process involved. The trade-off is that reverse mergers have historically been associated with increased fraud risk, since the process involves substantially less regulatory scrutiny and due diligence than a traditional IPO process requires, making it significantly more important for investors to conduct their own thorough research before investing in a company that went public through this method. Cross-border dual listing. This is the IPO that happens in two places at the same time. A cross-border dual listing occurs when a company lists its shares simultaneously on stock exchanges in two different countries, rather than choosing just one domestic exchange. This approach can provide access to a broader pool of potential investors, increased overall trading liquidity, and enhanced international brand visibility, particularly valuable for companies with significant business operations spanning multiple countries or regions. The complexity increases significantly, since the company must comply with the securities regulations, reporting requirements, and accounting standards of multiple different regulatory jurisdictions simultaneously, often requiring significant additional legal and compliance resources to manage successfully. Currency exchange rate fluctuations can also create price discrepancies between the two listings, sometimes creating arbitrage opportunities for sophisticated traders who monitor both markets closely for temporary pricing gaps. Every kind of IPO, 9 completely different ways a company can go public, each one determining exactly who gets the advantage and when they get it. Traditional IPOs favor early institutional access. Direct listings let the market decide. Dutch auctions attempt genuine price fairness. SPACs merge their way into existence. Secondary offerings and follow-on offerings raise more capital later. Dual-class structures protect founder control. Reverse mergers skip the front door entirely. Cross-border listings play in two markets at once. The next time a headline says a company is going public, you will not just see excitement. You will see exactly which mechanism they chose and exactly who that mechanism was actually built to benefit first. That is the point.